Today we're going to look at energy balance. This is the last part of the composition of food and energy handout. Now, you might be asking yourself the question, why are we keeping energy balance as a topic on its own? Well, first and foremost, as I've said to you in a previous lesson, we have no idea what is going to come up on the exam in 2025, but I have said to you that there are two areas that we need to look at very carefully. One, topics that have not been up in a very long time, and B, topics that have never been asked before, and then obviously everything in between. So if we look here at energy balance, the last time that we saw energy balance on a Leaving Cert exam paper was 2012. Now that's 13 years ago. What's more interesting is that it came up on question 1 and section B. Now, as you know, this is the area of the exam that is compulsory, so all students would have had to answer this question, and it was worth 12 marks, which we know equates to 3% of the Leaving Cert grade. Now, often this particular part of this chapter is left to one side. So for obvious reasons, potentially 12 marks, maybe more, maybe less, we don't know. But in the event that it's asked in the future, there's something I would like you to remember, and that is, if the language or terminology as follows appears, for example, if you see energy balance, or if you see words like energy input or energy output on any exam question, regardless of the marking scheme, I would divide my answer in 3 parts. And that is always, whether this was on a short question or a long question. Now, before we look at the 3 parts, we just need to understand exactly what is meant by the language, energy input and energy output. So, energy input. Where do we get our energy from? We know we get it from food. We also know that food is made up of 6 components or nutrients, but we specifically know that of the 6, only 3 provide the body with the source of energy. So energy input comes from our food, but specifically from what we call the macro nutrients. And we also know that the energy released from food is measured in one of 2 terms, kilocalories and kilojoules. Now, we've said already that kilojoules are generally used by nutritionists. We do, however, see kilojoules on prepackaged foodstuffs, but you and I are more familiar with the other measurement, and that is kilocalories, which we also see on the back of nutritional information labels on food. So that's our energy input. Then we have energy output. Now, what is energy output? This is the amount of energy that we're going to actually use, or our body is going to use. So we saw there recently that pretty much on average now, 2/3 of our total energy intake, the energy we take in from these macronutrients, is allocated for what we call our BMR, our basal metabolic rate. And at the time we thought that this is actually quite substantial, considering that the basal metabolic rate is the basic or the minimum amount of energy required to keep our body warm, our internal organs functioning, while lying down in a motionless position, measured 12 hours after eating. So the energy from food is used for our BMR, but then the remainder of that energy is used for various different activities. The most obvious activity would be walking, movement of arms, then more strenuous activities like swimming, running, jogging, etc. So we come back to the word energy balance. And like we said there a few minutes ago, we note that there are 3 parts. So first of all, we have a case where our energy input equals our energy output. And we're just going to box that off as we would do in an exam question. And we can write after energy input food and energy output. The energy from food is for our BMR and various activities. Now, we know that there are various different factors that influence energy requirements. We summarised energy requirements required by people with the 3 letters EAR, estimated average requirement. And we also know from previous lesson that there are various different factors that can influence our EAR, whether it's our body size, our gender, our level of activity, our occupation, whether a person is pregnant, lactating, etc. Now, the idea is that the energy on average that, say, a female takes in is about 1800 kilocalories. So just to note, that is just one particular example. That person, it might be somebody who normally takes in 2000 kilocalories, or someone who's doing a lot of exercise, 2300, 400 kilocalories a day. But for the purpose of this exam question, we're going to say 1800 kilocalories. So if 1800 kilocalories is ingested from nutrients like protein, lipids and carbohydrates, well then we need to have the same number of kilocalories used by the body on a daily basis. And basically one cancels out the other. Now, if we're consuming the same amount of kilocalories a day that we are using for our BMR and our activities, the result will be that we will have what's known as a constant body weight. And it's quite amazing, really, the way our body is able to adjust. In other words, you don't think about this too much on a daily basis. But if you were to think about it now, and if you are someone who maintains a constant body weight, even though the types of foods that you might eat daily might vary, the quantity or the amount is pretty much similar. So there are people, for example, have a bowl of cereal on a daily basis, but they pour the same amount subconsciously into that bowl every single day. Your lunch, it could be a wrap today, it could be couscous tomorrow, it could be a pasta salad, but the amount would be similar. And the same with our evening meal or your dinner time at whatever time you have it. And we all know that feeling of when we go outside the norm, when we eat more than we would normally at dinner time, for example. Maybe it's a birthday occasion or another celebration, and our body notices that we have eaten more than normal. The same way, if you skipped a meal, your body knows that it's eaten less and you feel hunger pangs, which you would not be normally used to. So the body becomes very used to very quickly. You're talking maybe about a week, 10 days for that adjustment. And for people that go on low kilocalorie diets, where they deliberately try and lose weight, 6 months on, where they have greatly reduced their diets intake and the amount of food they've eaten, if they eat more than the norm, they feel it, or less than the norm, and they'll feel it as well. So this is significant if our present weight is within the correct range that is healthy for our body size. So that's our first point. Energy input equals energy output, and we maintain a constant body weight, which ideally is what we want if our body is within a healthy weight range. Our second point is where our energy input is actually greater than our energy output. Now, we've all had that day where we eat the extra something. It might be the extra spoon of pasta. It might be that you had a dessert or a sweet treat on that particular day, but we're not doing that constantly. But if you are going beyond the number of kilocalories that you're ingesting a day, if they are more than the amount of activity and your BMR, well, then you're going to gain weight. So for example, we'll take somebody whose energy input on a daily basis is about 3,000 kilocalories. Now, you can put any figure you wish here within reason. Obviously not something mad like 5,000, but anywhere between 2000 and 2500. And that's greater than my energy output, for example, might just be 2000 kilocalories. Now, it doesn't appear to be very much, but if this was on a constant basis, the excess kilocalories are converted into fat, which is then stored as adipose tissue, and that adipose tissue is then stored under our skin. And over time, the result of this extra 300 kilocalories on a daily basis over a number of weeks, months, we end up with weight gain. But the significance of that is, if we continue to gain weight over time, there could come a point when we are at least 20% above our weight that is recommended for our healthy size, for our body size, and in a case like that, we could end up in the obesity bracket. And if we end up here, unfortunately, there are all sorts of complications, which we'll talk about when we look at the specific dietary requirements. You could have problems like, say something like varicose veins because of the weight on the legs from the upper region of the body. You could end up with respiratory or breathing problems. Some people can even end up with a condition which is called sleep apnea. You can end up with heart problems, say like heart disease. Or you could potentially end up, particularly if that weight is around the midriff, with diabetes, particularly diabetes type 2. So that's our second point, when the energy intake is greater than the energy output. And finally, we move on to our third point. And logic says we're looking at when our energy input is less than our energy output. Now, I suppose at some point in all our lives, we look at maybe possible weight gain and we decide that we want to reduce that for health purposes. So nutritionists would say that if we were to reduce our kilocalorie intake for the average female, now I'm speaking of, to about 1200 kilocalories a day, on average, you're going to lose about 1 kg per week, which is just over 2 pounds. And that is steady, slow, and would be considered to be a safe amount. However, some people go below this particular amount of kilocalories, and they might be dramatically low. They might go as low as maybe 900 kilocalories. And yet they are doing a lot of exercise, and they're using up maybe 2,100 kilocalories as a female. There's a significant difference here. So what's going to happen? Where are we going to get the extra energy for our BMR and for our activities? Obviously, it's going to come from the reserves of adipose tissue beneath our skin. And the result over time is that there is going to be weight loss. Now, this is fine if you need to lose weight and you need to get into that bracket of a healthy weight range. But unfortunately, if this continues, this significant weight loss, it can lead to a number of health issues over time. Now, with regard, say, for example, for females, hair could become quite brittle, skin can become quite dull. Then there might be issues with fertility, where there's too much weight lost and it can affect a woman's fertility. And the list goes on. Obviously, it can affect our bone health and etc. So there are 3 points. So we'll go back to our handout here. So to maintain a constant body weight, the energy intake of adults must equal the energy output. We note that energy intake from food should equal the energy output used for our BMR and energy for activities. If we consume more kilocalories, extra kilocalories are connected to fat and stored beneath the skin as adipose tissue, could result in obesity, where we are 20% above our recommended weight for our body size. The unfortunate thing is, once fat cells are created, they can never be destroyed. Now, I can tell you, when I heard that in college many moons ago, I think I was traumatized for about a week. So just to explain what we're talking about here, say there's our skin, and underneath the surface of our skin, we have our fat cells. And our kilocalorie intake, our energy input, happens to be 900 kilocalories. Yet our energy output happens to be 2,100 kilocalories. So I said earlier, where does the energy come from? From the reserves here in our fat cells. So over time, what will happen? You will no longer be able to pinch more than an inch, and people get physically smaller. But it's not that the fat cells disappear, and this is important to know. In fact, what happens is the fat cells shrink. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that there's less adipose tissue beneath the skin, but if we try and look at the number of fat cells, they are pretty much the same number on both sides. So those fat cells, once created, cannot be destroyed. So young children, for example, we need to try and maintain a healthy weight so that we don't have those fat cells there. Because once, and for adults also, because once that fat is gained, once those fat cells are created, and we do lose weight and they shrink, we are much more likely to gain weight in the future, having gained weight in the past, because these fat cells are literally, shall we say, waiting under the skin to expand again. So once fat cells are created, they can never be destroyed. Therefore, it's advisable to try and maintain a healthy weight for our body size. We said to lose weight, ideally nutritionists would say 1,200 kilocalories a day, to lose about a kg per week. And we said that the body gets used to eating a similar amount for satiety. Satiety is a term that is used for the feeling of fullness. Now, the next part there, factors affecting control of food intake. I just put that in because I felt it deserved to be there, but I just want you to know that there's no need to learn. But it is worth reading about what factors influence the amount of food we take in. Physically, we might feel hungry, and so therefore we eat food. Physically, we feel full, we stop eating food. Psychologically, or psychological issues will influence our food intake. For some people, they may be have very low mood, they may be severely depressed due to an emotional trauma, and then they go and they eat food. And that's something I think it's important to briefly mention. We should try and break the cycle. For years and years, particularly when I was a child, if people were, if children were good, they were given a treat. If they cut their knee, etc., they were given a treat, and it was always food. And that's psychologically then, in the subconscious, what's happening is that you are connecting food with an emotion. And for most of us, that has no real significance. For example, we'll eat a sweet treat and we take no notice. It's a good day, we deserve a treat. We've had maybe not so great day, we deserve a treat, but you'll have one bar or whatever the case might be. Unfortunately for some people, with the emotional connection with food that stems in childhood, and then there's some particular trauma in their life, And what they try and do is they try and fill the emotional void through food, because deep in their subconscious they connect maybe sadness with being or being upset, being rewarded with food. And unfortunately, that seems to have continued on. Even still in 2024, there are parents rewarding children with food. We need to break that cycle. Maybe allow them to watch a little bit of TV a bit later, or maybe that you're going to go on a trip, or you might play maybe a game or something like that. But that connection with emotion and food, it's really important. You as future parents will change that. Now, moving on to our sample answer. I said there earlier that 2012 was the last time that this appeared on question 1, section B. And the question was, discuss the importance of balancing energy intake and energy output. So here we see the terminology energy intake and energy output. So I have said to you, answer, divide in 3 parts. And those 3 parts: 1, energy intake equals energy output. 2, our energy intake is greater than our energy output. And 3, our energy intake is less than our energy output. Now, it's important to note that this word here is highlighted. It's not just discuss balancing energy intake and energy output, i.e. making these general statements that ideally energy intake should equal energy output. If you have more kilocalories consumed than used up, you gain weight. If you have less kilocalories than you're using up, you end up with weight loss. They specifically said discuss the importance. So while each part is worth 4 marks each, we note that there are 2 subpoints within each one. So we've made our statement, and then note I've used the word it's important if a constant healthy body weight is to be maintained. It continues over a period of time, and it can result, and I could actually put in here, it's important to know, just to have the same language. So important to know, this may result with complications. And note I've said here are 2, we've made our statement, and then it's important that this does not continue, this long-term weight loss, because of the various issues. So 12 marks, 3 at 4 marks each, and note we have 4 marks, and we have 2 marks multiplied by 2. So that should be there, we'll just change that. So that is energy input and energy output, but I would strongly advise that you would make sure to go over this because of the fact that it wasn't asked since 2012. Take care.